This is the Tank Talk podcast with Belinda Glenn.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Tank Talk. And the URC was back with a bang this past weekend, although only for this past weekend. I'm not really sure it makes that much sense to me that they decided to squeeze in one round of URC between the internationals and the European Challenge and Champions Cups kicking off. I think we could have probably benefited from letting some of those international players have a week off. But anyway, it is what it is, and there's obviously timing issues given the length of the competition. And so one round of URC is what we got. And it was a good round for the Sharks. They secured their first ever victory against the Stormers in the URC with a 21-15 win. It also means that they've now beaten all three of the previous URC champions this season. And with 4 wins from 6 games, they're in 6th place on the log, which leaves them in a much better position than they were this time last year. I think we can all agree on that. It was a bit of a strange game on Saturday. The Stormers got off to a really flying start, largely driven by Sasha Feinberg and Ngomazulu, who looked as if he was going to have an exceptional game. But they just weren't able to capitalize on that flying start. And that, I think, really characterized their game on Saturday. Conversely, the Sharks maybe didn't get off to as quick a start, but when they did get into the opposition 22, they were much better at taking their chances and making the most of those opportunities. They had their first opportunity at around the 10th or 11th minute of the game and capitalized immediately when Ethan Hooker got into the 22 and scored a try. He also scored, or appeared to score, a second try later on in the game, but that was disallowed when the TMO picked up on some obstruction. And we'll chat a little bit more about some of those interventions later on. I think, though, hopefully, the really good game that Ethan had on Saturday will allay some of the concerns that people have been expressing around him playing at wing instead of playing at centre. I think he's been doing really well in both positions, and at a young age it's always good to have that versatility, and so he's showcasing that he has that adaptability and the ability to play in both roles really well. So that's great. Another player not quite as young as Ethan Hooker, but who has also been having an exceptional season so far, is Siya Kolisi, who scored the Sharks' second try. He has just been phenomenal since he came back to the Sharks, and I think has really just been reminding everyone time and again that he's only invisible when he's playing for the wrong team. He's just been absolutely everywhere in every game that he's played for the Sharks so far this year, and this was definitely no exception. He had an absolutely great game on Saturday. As I mentioned earlier, Sasha Feinberg and Ngomazulu looked as if he was going to have a really great game, and I think his absolutely standout moment was the incredible drop goal that he scored for the Stormers, which finally got them on the board. Unfortunately, not long after that, he had to leave the field with an HIA and was unable to return. And this brought Marnie Lebok onto the field. And, I really feel for Marnie. I think he came onto the field in the midst of what appeared to be a lot of confusion for the Stormers. They seemed to be quite indecisive about what they wanted to do, which also was a characteristic of the game on Saturday. They seemed a bit rudderless at times. But it's not all their fault. So they had been given 2 options for penalties and in 2 different places on the field, and the ref then walked one of those back, realizing it wasn't a penalty upon review, and so they only had 1 place to choose from. They had chosen to kick for the poles. They then changed their minds and decided to go for touch once the second penalty was no longer applicable. But then after a whole lot of internal debates, they then changed their minds again and decided to kick for poles. All of this with Marnie standing around waiting to be told what to do. And then when he did finally kick for poles, he had very, very little time and almost ran out of time before he made the kick. And so it seemed almost inevitable that he would miss. And he now, I don't know, the Marnie discourse rages on, and I'm not sure there's any value in contributing to that. But all I will say is that when you know you have a player who is a confidence player and who can get in his head sometimes, putting him in that situation where there's all this debate and confusion and nobody seems to know what's going on, it just feels like setting him up to fail a little bit. And so he only had 2 opportunities to kick for poles in the game on Saturday. He missed both of them. The fact that he had other really great facets to his play on Saturday is, as always, overlooked by some people, and the discourse rages on. And that's the end of that for me. We'll chat about his disallowed try a little bit later, but I do really feel for him. He certainly also wasn't the only person to miss a kick on Saturday, because Sasha also missed a kick. But, these things, they happen. And unfortunately, it's just one of those things. And so they went to the break with the Sharks leading 14-3 and the Stormers having conceded a yellow card just before the halftime break. Unfortunately, though, the Sharks weren't able to capitalize on that yellow card. And that has also been characteristic of their games so far this season, is that there just seems to be this lack of consistency in the way they play across the full 80 minutes. And so it was the Stormers who scored first after the break, not too long after the break, off the back of a stolen line-out. So they weren't able to convert that score, but they were the ones to actually score during that yellow card period. And it seemed as if both sides were having a couple of issues with their lineouts, but the set piece that continues to plague the Sharks, which we've spoken about ad nauseum at this point, is the scrum. And it's really a tricky one to deal with, because they shouldn't be having these issues in the scrum. We must give credit to Neetling Forshire. I thought he was the best player for the Stormers on the day, and he was absolutely fantastic at scrum time. But the Sharks have the personnel, and those players are certainly excelling when they play for the Springboks. So we have to consider what else is at play here, what the other factors may be. The coaches are really going to need to address this as soon as they can, because it can't continue to be a talking point and an issue every single week. They need to deal with it. And so then another player who was really exceptional gave the Sharks their third try, Andre Esterhuizen. He has just been so wonderful since he returned home. He's so strong in the carry, so strong in his tackles, not afraid to put his body on the line, got pace, and scored his 4th try of the season in this game. And so it's really good. He's definitely been a very worthwhile transfer. Wonderful to have him back at the Shark Tank. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't also mention James Venter, who was celebrating his 50th appearance for the Sharks in an international competition. For me, James is really one of the unsung heroes of Sharks rugby. The Sharks often get a lot of flack, rightly or wrongly, for not developing local talent. But James actually is an example of fantastic local talent that the Sharks have developed. He was born in Port Shepstone. He went to high school at Glenwood. He did play for the Lions for a little while, but he has really excelled since he came to the Sharks in 2020, and just never stopped working hard. He's one of those players who you can just always count on to be making the hard tackles, to be at the breakdown, to be trying to turn the ball over and often succeeding, and just really tireless and not afraid to put his body on the line as well. So he has been great for the Sharks, and I'm so glad that he got to celebrate this milestone on Saturday. And hopefully we get to see a lot more of him in the black and white over the years. I think he's been a really great talent for the Sharks and will continue to do so. Of course, Apelele Fassi is also the a phenomenal talent playing for the Sharks at the moment and was man of the match once again. He had another exceptional game, really just displaying his increasing and ever increasing agility and understanding of the game and ability under the high ball and all of the things. I'm kind of running out of superlatives for Apalele because every week he just does something fantastic. I think the real talking points this week were his intercepts. And so the first one was phenomenal. He absolutely prevented the Stormers from scoring a try with that intercept. Just displaying a fantastic understanding of the game and ability to read what's going to happen, and then putting that athleticism into play and putting his body on the line to get that intercept and prevent the try. Unfortunately, he then attempted to do something very similar a few moments later with much less success. And, as much as I don't disagree that it was a penalty try, I think it was, I do disagree that it was cynical, because I think knowing Apalele, and I think Lucanio actually raised this with the ref, knowing Apalele and knowing what he's capable of and knowing what he had just done a few moments earlier, I think he genuinely believed he could intercept that ball and had a reasonable chance of catching it. But he wasn't in as good a position. It had no, there was no opportunity for him to actually catch it, and he was offside anyway. So penalty try was given. Apalele spent the rest of the game in the sin bin, which I think was unfortunate. It obviously took the shine off a bit of a stellar performance, but it is what it is. These things happen. And then suddenly it was like we were having a flashback to our last two games where we have this inability to close it out, and suddenly the Sharks are taking their collective foot off the pedal, and it looks as if the opposition is going to score against us in quick succession. And so Marnie scored a quick try after the whistle had been blown. I felt sick. If that try had been converted, they obviously would have won. I know people who switched the TV off and didn't actually see what the final result was because they assumed that the Stormers had won. And it was only an eagle-eyed TMO intervention that resulted in that try being disallowed because of Marnie's own earlier knock-on. I know Stormers fans will be incredibly disappointed by that, and some of them may feel hard done by. It was the correct decision. It was a very clear and obvious knock-on once they showed it on the big screen. But, it is disappointing for them. I get it. That being said, and this will probably be unpopular with Stormers fans, I think if they had won, that wouldn't have been the right result because they just didn't have as good a game as the Sharks were having, and they weren't able to capitalize previously or even create opportunities really previously. So it was the right result. And I think it was also a great result and a great reward for the Durban faithful who had showed up. And kudos to the Sharks marketing team. There was close to 34,000 people in the stands on Saturday, which is phenomenal. And World Rugby is forever talking about how they want to grow the game and how they want to please the existing fans and attract new fans. And all I can say is that changing laws and fiddling with the current laws and introducing new laws and 20-minute red cards and all of that nonsense, that isn't the way. The way is to have great game day experiences and to put on a show and to have entertainment that appeals to people and draws people in. I don't really care about those things. I'm going to watch the rugby, but I'm a diehard fan. If we're wanting to attract new fans or make casual fans fall in love with the game, get them to the stadium. That's the way to do it. Or get them to see on TV how much fun other people are having in the stadium, how much fun rugby really is. And that's how you attract a new fan base or cement a love of rugby in the existing fan base, not by endlessly fiddling with the laws. I will say that it was probably not the most engaging game for the people either in the stands or watching on TV on Saturday. And I think some of that is definitely down to the fact that we had two referees in Marius van der Westhuizen and Marius Jonker, the TMO, who are exceptionally meticulous. bordering on pedantic at times. And that's not necessarily a criticism. I think you need meticulous referees. You need referees that are eagle-eyed and that are looking out for the things that might easily be missed, the knock-ons, the head contact, all of that stuff. We need them to see that. But at the same time, the endless reviews can destroy the flow of the game. And then when you add to that the humidity in Durban and the resultant handling errors, you get a bit of a disjointed affair. But anyway, we will gladly take the win and move on to the next competition starting this weekend, which is the European Champions Cup. The Sharks play the Exeter Chiefs at home as well. It's a 3 p.m. kickoff, so that humidity is going to come into play in a big way, and it will be interesting to see how Exeter Chiefs deal with that. The Sharks are certainly going to want to continue their current run of good form at home and up the ante as well, and they will be looking for a good win on Saturday. So I'm interested to hear from you. Do you think they can do it? Let me know in the comments.
This is the Tank Talk podcast with Belinda Glenn.